I'd like to just start, though, by saying a really big thank you to the NEU, what was the National Union of Teachers. Not only have they given us this room today, they're key donors, financial donors, to stand up to racism, but much more importantly, over the years, they have been key moral and political supporters. And I think in lots of ways, without the NUT, the NEU, we wouldn't be where we are literally today. And I would, he's not here, but I would like to formally thank particularly Kevin Courtney for all the support that he's given us in, developing this organisation. Okay. Now, we've got a great panel today, and it's no accident that we are starting with a workshop on education, because education is becoming a forum of key political debate about race. I mean, we've had the imposition of Prevent in our schools, universities and colleges. We have the agenda of the imposition of British values. In higher education, a discussion about the decolonisation of the curriculum, but also most recently some absolutely unprecedented statements by Ofsted about their desire to ban the wearing of the hijab and headscarf in primary schools. And last week, more statements from Amanda Spielman, the lead officer of Ofsted, about really her concerns about the radicalisation by Muslims that's taking place supposedly in our schools. So it's quite fitting that we start. Now, there's going to be a wide variety of discussion. I'm just going to start. Each speaker, will speak for about 6 minutes. Then we'll have plenty of opportunity for contributions from the floor. There's lots of initiatives being organised by individual teachers, which I'll hope they'll talk about. So I'll start with Dave Muritu, who is from the UCU, the University College Union National Equality Committee, and he's the chair. And I'm going to welcome Dave.
Thank you. I'm Dave Muritu from UCU. It's a pleasure to speak at this trade union conference, where hopefully we can share and develop some strategies in the struggle. And education, as Jess has said, has become the key. Sorry.
It's all right, Jane.
They said, no, for a bit of reassurance, reassurance, a bit of security, and all the colleagues that are keeping the march against racism at the very forefront of the struggle. Sorry, I had one of these colds. I'm not infectious, by the way, although I did sort of sidle up on the wall just to keep away from it. I don't want to give you I've just had one of those. I've recovered, by the way, I have. So I see people looking a bit, so my voice is a bit gone. But I do want to say to Wayman and to all the organisers, I think one of the reasons I was late was it was the end of Refugee Week for a lot of our universities. They're focusing on refugees, and there are some people who are complacent about or disparaging of the number of issues that you're focusing on today.
Going on in the area I come from. I teach in an FE college in West Brom, and just up the road at Wolverhampton University, recently, the Express and Star, which is a particularly nasty right-wing local paper in the Black Country, organised a debate at the university on Powell's legacy, Enoch Powell's legacy. He was an MP in Wolverhampton. We had a UCU member who was prepared to go to the debate, but then found out that Bill Etheridge from UKIP, who has in the past praised Hitler, was on the panel. and actually stood down and didn't go along to this. But the paper managed to whip up a bit of a frenzy over this. And she's a black woman, but she never agreed to take part in this debate. But the paper still made it into a story and said that she backed down, and there's been an ongoing hate campaign against Eleanor. And it's particularly pertinent that she is in Enoch Powell's old seat. She was attacked in the paper for making comments about the Black Country flag. And if you know the Black Country flag, it's got a chain on it. She made comments about how the chain was a link to slavery, and this led to more hate-filled attacks from the paper. The paper is particularly has a lot of vitriol against the students who organise against racist speakers, and has been framed in the capitalist press as enemies of free speech, which is again ridiculous. So there is a real need to work with students and support students, because they are really at the forefront of this battle. And in UCU we have, as Jay commented, we have our campaign of decolonising the curriculum, but we have jumped on board of what the students have started. The Decolonising the Curriculum campaign has been started at Cambridge University and at SOAS University, and those campaigns were led by students. So students are key in our battle against racism in the education system. One other initiative at UCU that we've tried to push is something called themed learning weeks. In FE colleges across London in the last couple of years, they have suspended the curriculum for a whole week and have themed their learning around We Are All Immigrants. And this has had a fantastic response from students, and it's at the forefront of education, and really does mean that the activists get a chance to take over the curriculum and push anti-racist policies and anti-racist education in colleges. Also, UCU has been involved in sending activists and education workers to Calais when the camp was still there. A lot of the two schools that were out there were populated by UCU activists who were teaching and helping students, helping the refugees to with the skills they need to get into Europe. One thing that's very positive at UCU as well, that we currently have elections going on for the NEC, and we have, for the first time, a black activist who is standing for election for the president of our union, who is a black woman, Nita Sangera. So if you are a UCU member, please vote for Nita in the elections currently ongoing. I'll finish there. Thank you very much.
To the right, they would be aggressive towards migrants. They would be aggressive towards decent people, getting a society that was progressive, decent, left-wing, and they would move towards a more hatred-based society, but unfortunately doing some of the things that would keep people settled. And you see that in Poland and Hungary today with the benefit system and so on. And this has happened. This has happened. They have mainstreamed their message. And when they look at Britain, they think the same. They think that mainstream is happening in the press, it's happening with the way UKIP behaves, and it's happening with the way the Conservative Party behaves today. So my message is this. When we, and this is the final point, when we look at the 3 million, the EU migrants, when we look at the problems of immigration...
Love Music UK Racism is basically an extension of what we saw during the late 70s with the Rock Against Racism, which carried the fight, the anti-racism message through the conduit of arts and music. Truth is arts is the conduit of truth for many people. It's just a case of reverse engineering what young people are interested in and using it as a platform to have these discussions, these conversations about the things that affect us all in our individual lives and in the macro society as well. So love music, hate racism. As I said, music drives culture and political commentary. We saw in the 70s, music was used to galvanise a generation of young people against the rising tide of the far right with the NF, and because they were gaining political ground. We saw big movements in schools during the 70s and early 80s. We had SCAN, which was like school children against Nazis. So kids wearing the badges. So this kind of un-mainstream message of anti-racism was still permeating through society on the lower levels, which helped to fight back the rise of the right. Me, myself, I'm also a performance poet and a hip-hop artist, as I said, and I visit schools, do workshops in schools on various different topics. I mean, it doesn't really matter. It could be Black history, it could be anti-bullying, it could be about success. Recently, I completed a project in pupil referral units, eight units with excluded pupils who wrote poetry on World War I. Some of the themes carried over still today, where we see poor people being exploited for the benefit of the elite, trying to expand their grip on the main aspects of society. Also did a big project as well with 8 other schools in Birmingham talking about the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Children. So this was in primary school. So what I'm saying is politics affects every aspect of our daily life, and there's no reason why children shouldn't be engaging in the classroom on these topics. So I'm coupled up with the current Birmingham Poet Laureate Matt Windle, a former Birmingham Poet Laureate Dreadlock Alien. Together we've also produced a series of teachers' resources. So if you was to go onto BritishCulturalValues.com, you'll visit our website, from which you can download a resource pack that looks at British cultural values. The 4 core elements being democracy, respect and tolerance of others with different beliefs. There's individual liberty, rule of law. So these 4 core components of British cultural values are what the wording around that. We've devised resources on like 16 sample poems, teachers and writing support materials. Development tips, because it's really important that we have these conversations in a neutral environment such as a classroom, because at home we don't know what some of these young pupils are being exposed to, probably a bit more far right kind of anti-immigrant kind of stance, potentially being being co-opted, these words around race, even around gender and all these different things, because individual liberty in itself covers a whole range of things. So so British cultural values. You'll get the free resource. Just go onto that website. There's a little scroll down. Put your email address in there. You'll get a free PDF pack with all the things that I just mentioned that looks at British cultural values, and that in itself might be a good resource for teachers to start from. And my email address is on there too, so please feel free to get in touch with me. I'll talk you through the materials. I deliver the workshop myself, so that's a potential possibility as well. So the pack is worth £97, but you can get it for free as a PDF if you just log on and just request it. So in a nutshell, that's kind of all I had to say, really, other than maybe I could share a quick poem. Is that all right? Yeah. All right, so, actually, I'll give you a free teacher's resource. It's called Opposites Poem. If you like it, just email me and I'll send it to you, no problem. Everybody gets kids thinking about words, and so for want of a better way of saying it, so we'll have a little challenge with people on the left versus people on the right, or should I say people on this side against people on this side. All right, so the object of this exercise is to basically say the opposite word of what I say, and I'm going to see which side says it quickest and the loudest. Okay, so we've got our panel of judges up front here. We're going to see which side responds the quickest. Okay, so you ready? kind of no, okay. Okay, so you got to say the opposite word of what I say. Okay, so if I say like left, you'd say
Right.
cool. If I say up, you'd say
Down.
okay, if I say big, you'd say small. Okay, so you get it. Right, cool. Right, so here we go. If I say in, then you say in. If I say whisper, you say whisper. If I say left, then you say left. If I say day, then you say day. If I say good, you say good. If I said happy, you say happy. If I say big, then you say big. If I say short, you say short. If I say high, you say high. If I said fast, then you say fast. If I say cold, you say cold. If I say start, then you say start. Okay, we lost my time. Thank you very much. Bye for now.
The next speaker, and sorry, I will say, I mean, if Kurly's got that resource, let's put it up on the Stand Up to Racism website. Okay, the next speaker I'm going to call is Daniel Kabini. He is a NEU member from North Tyneside and is presently standing for the BAME seat on the National Executive of the NEU. Daniel.
Thank you. Hi, I've travelled down from Newcastle, forgot my glasses, so I'm going to be probably closing one eye, but I'm all right, okay? So, thanks for having me here today. I teach mainly white working class boys, all of whom have been removed from mainstream education for demonstrating extreme behaviours. I try and create a really anti-racist classroom through teaching a critical education. So that's what I'm going to be touching on a fair bit in this 5 minutes. But in this time of Trump and fascism on the rise across Europe and this ever-growing toxicity, this toxic environment of racism, organisations like this, building an anti-racist current on our streets and in our workplaces is incredibly important. In fact, in my lifetime, I can't think of a time when educating against hate has been more important. But increasingly, our schools are becoming an environment where that is an absolute challenge. And that challenge, in terms of creating an anti-racist environment, is purposely created by our government and policymakers. We've got a fight on in our schools, attacks on teacher training. The data-driven, competitive nature of schools completely restricts the space that we have. We've got prevent Ofsted's inspection of hijabs, the promotion of British nationalism, masked as values, all leads to an environment where hate can flourish. We already know that the Education Secretary believes that we can turn troops to teachers. But not only that, teach first, school-based training, and this further talk of teachers just being apprentices paid £3 an hour is a direct attack on our ability to create a fairer society. When I did my training, I learned about Freire, I learned about Simon and Vygotsky. Not only did I learn about how children develop, my teacher training in itself was a political education. Now, education can be a tool to change the world. Our schools do not have to reflect the society we live in now, but can reflect the society that we wish to live in. And with the government removing the right for our educators to be taught about critical education, they cannot make a conscious choice between being an educator for a liberation or being an educator for the purposes of maintaining the economic status quo. So there is a fight on in our schools for critical and anti-racist teacher training to be had. The exam factory nature of education also removes the much-needed space against educating against hate. There's simply not the time in the day. I teach Year 6. Some of our children struggle, but I'll just talk you through a regular day for our Year 2 children. They've got phonics in the morning, followed by English, followed by maths, a short break for lunch. There's some SATs that need to be done, so they better have some booster sessions in SPAG and some other booster sessions in mathematics.
makes. I mean, what a day our children have. The data-driven environment of our schools makes the space for discussion even more difficult. We're not there to create rounded individuals who can critically think and challenge racism and Islamophobia. We're there to create the next generation of compliant workers, or so we're told. And then there's this promotion of British nationalism masters values. I mean, what are these values supposed to be? Is it God save the Queen, a monarchy that was responsible for empire and slavery? Is it the Union Jack that once flew over the colonised world like a butcher's apron? Or is it Churchill, a man who literally starved the people of India and Bangladesh to death? And then this other British value that is constantly mooted is democracy. And of course, it's only white nations that are democratic. It's spending 30 seconds every 5 years in a box. Democracy. For countries that just, for political parties that all seek to maintain the status quo. I mean, I'm up for that discussion, but these are not discussions that we're having in our schools at the moment because we don't have those space. Those who govern us, they don't want black history or even real history to be taught on the curriculum. They want to promote this nationalistic island nation view. And then there is the prevent agenda. Yesterday I was in a school in East London. I just spent the day there for a visit. It's a school in East London that predominantly served the local Bangladeshi community, majority Muslim. Now, I can think of nothing more brutal than an Ofsted inspector going into that school and asking why an 8-year-old girl's wearing a hijab. Yeah. But, you know, so we're in this situation now, and it's quite easy to get pessimistic, but I don't think we should, because there's a fight on and there's a fight back, and it starts in this room and it starts in our schools and in our workplaces. So I just want to say here, let's keep on building that movement that welcomes migrants and refugees. Let's keep on standing up to Islamophobia. Let's stamp out anti-Semitism. But let's fight for a comprehensive and critical education system that puts anti-racism at the heart of education. And let's fight for an education system that liberates all. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Rakia Ishmael. She is a Labour councillor in Islington and a Unison member, and I consider her my sister-in-arms in Islington the Islington Stand Up to Racism group. I mean, Rakia recently organised a fantastic protest of about 50, mostly women, outside a McDonald's store when they tried... Within, literally, I mean, I think we had about 18 hours' notice where they tried to stop a Muslim girl entering the store and asked her to take her hijab off. So it's a great pleasure to have Rakia with us.
Bismillah, I greet you in the name of Allah, and I also greet you, Bismillah, Salaam alaikum, which means God bless you all, and God bless us, brings us all together here today. And thank you for Stand Up to Racism, and thanks for that lovely introduction, Chan. Stand Up to Racism, Islamophobia, it's something very close to my heart, because I remember as a young girl back home in the day, in Somaliland, Hargeisa, I suffer and my family suffer because who we were. And racism still follows me right here today in England. We are in 2018, 2017. We should not talk about anti-Islamophobia. We should not talk about Islamophobia. We should not talk about racism. We should not talk about anti-Semitics. We are human beings. And human beings, we all need something. My 5 fingers are different. So are all we. We all have one common thing. We are human beings. And we need to fight for that for a day and night. I would die for and stand for any form of racism. I remember working in a school back in the day in 2002, and a young Muslim year 6 child was crying, and I said to the mom, what's wrong with her? The mom wouldn't tell me. I just kept quiet, and luckily I was seconded to the school. And as I was seconded to the school, I had opportunity to intervene. And when I asked the mom, she said, my daughter is suffering because she is wearing the hijab. That's back in 2002. And then the beauty of speaking a different language is another thing as well. So I went to the teacher, and I said, we'd like to find out what's wrong with this child. And as we talked to the particular teacher, unfortunately, I know you love teachers and you're beautiful teachers, but there are so many that are also different. So I'm not stamping out teachers, but there is in every society someone we need to stamp out of racism. And luckily, I said to the teacher, I said to the mom, if you have done something wrong to your child, the social service will be on your back like no one else's business. So we need to do something. And I will tell you quite cheekily that in my language, you can tell the teacher that you're going to go to the local education authority and complain about the teacher. Believe me, Yumi, that's the first time I encountered racism. And the teacher said to me, she doesn't have to go that far. We'll sort out. And believe me, 2 days later, the child was the best child in the school assembly, has had God knows what. And that's what racism is about. And I left the school and have been transferred to another school after a few months. And luckily, the parents got together and the teacher has been sacked. The head teacher has been sacked because of racism. And it's about empowering women. It's about empowering the next generation. Coming back to the campaign of McDonald's, the hijab, I was quite shocked and stunned on 1st of December. Paul of Stand Up to Racism Islington called me and said, Rakia, we must do something. I said, there's no question. There is absolutely no question. And luckily, we all got together and we stood in front of McDonald's and campaigned like no one else's business. Of course, McDonald's has apologized, but why should they apologize? They shouldn't have done it in the first place. And what happens to young people wearing hijab in schools, in public places, myself? Why should I apologize? Yeah. I'm a human being. I have a different faith, so have you. Why should I apologize? Why should you apologize for your existence? Yeah. Well, Theresa May's government has got some advisors like Sarah Khan, Amina Alon, and many who do not represent me as a Muslim woman and any other Muslim community. Yeah. It's about dividing. It's about hatred. It's actually based on a hatred ideology about Islam. Islam is no different to any other faith. All faiths are peaceful, loving community, and we need to get together to that point that I stand up to racism, and Islington stand up to racism. Let me tell you something. We have achieved so many in such a short space of time, thanks Jan and Paul, and we have opposed the hijab in primary school. Open letter to the offset Amanda Spill, and we are going to keep on campaigning. What we need from this conference and many, many other conferences is that we need to talk to our communities, our young people, from wherever they come from. It does not matter whether you are Christian, Muslim, Judaism, ATS, Sikhism. We are human beings. We need to fight. And I, for one, I'm here. I hope you can all support me. Thank you so much.
Rakia smashes the stereotypes. The last speaker we're going to call is Jess Edwards. She's actually replacing Paul Phillips on this morning's platform. Jess is a member of the NEU executive and for London and a primary school teacher.
Thanks. I want to start on the hijab issue, actually, because there are lots of things we can do. There's lots of educators in the room, whether they're at primary, secondary, or in colleges or whatever, that we can do. And I just want to give an example from my own workplace, which is we had somebody from a secondary school. I work in a primary school, a local secondary school, a young woman, 14 years old, came in to talk about why she wears a hijab, and she talked about the racism that she had suffered through the education system, on the streets, all those kinds of things, in an assembly to our very small children who got to take part in a discussion with her about it. And what I would say is that, it's often discussed at school about whether it's right or wrong and all of, those kinds of things for young children to be wearing the hijab. There wasn't a single teacher in the school that left that assembly, one, dry-eyed because it was moving and people were moved to tears, but two, nobody left in any doubt that the right of people to choose what they wear on their heads is an absolute fundamental human right, and it is not something that should be policed by the state and policed by Ofsted. And the thing with I wanted to mainly talk about actually was the curriculum, and it's a shame to go after Daniel, who's talked so eloquently on it. I wanted to add some stuff. So for people that don't know, and I'm sure lots of people will, there's been a huge narrowing of what we're able to teach in our schools, and a hugely more prescriptive curriculum brought in that's much more based on teachers standing at the front imparting facts and knowledge to children, and they base it on an attack on what's always termed as child-centred learning. So in other words, a kind of learning that is relevant to the children that we teach in the modern world. And I want to talk a little bit particularly about the history curriculum and how that manifests itself. So in Key Stage 1, which we're talking about children from the ages of 5 to the age of 7, the curriculum specifies that they must be taught the basic concepts of nation, civilisation, monarchy, democracy, war and peace. When they brought that in, they talked about it being about children learning what is termed as our island story, the place of Britain within the world, a chronological history of Britain that starts with the Stone Age and ends with, we used to always teach World War II, now it's World War I in Key Stage 2 at the end of primary school in Key Stage 6. Why World War I? Because there's been, over the years, an acceptance and an understanding that World War I was a bloody colonial war fought for imperialist aims, and that meant the slaughter of thousands upon thousands of people. Their curriculum wants to re-win for their side the idea that World War I had nothing to do with empire, nothing to do with imperialism, nothing to do with colony, and that was a good war fought for freedom and justice. So they skew everything in the curriculum towards this warped view of British history. Anything that is wide on the wider world is taught in terms of its impact on British history. So whether it's the Romans or the Vikings, we used to just teach them sort of course it would touch on Roman invasion and Vikings and everything. It's really now about particularly Romans, their impact on British society. And I want to quote Niall Ferguson, the historian Niall Ferguson, who says that children leave school knowing nothing of the Norman conquest, but everything about the Third Reich. Well, that's a good thing to know about, isn't it? Because we don't want to repeat history. That's the whole point of it. They know nothing of the Norman conquest, but everything about the Third Reich and the Civil Rights Movement. I think that, exactly, isn't it? That's good. But that quote, I think, encompasses everything about what they're trying to win for in terms of our curriculum. British values. I want to say something on British values. See, my childminder sent me has a newsletter, and she sent a newsletter in. A part of her legal duty is report how she's teaching British values to my 3-year-old son. How she's teaching them about democracy, rule of law, individual liberty, mutual respect and tolerance, and all of these things. It's pervasive. It's not, it's not just people think about it being a secondary level. It's not. You're talking about this stuff being forced down somehow the throats of 2-year-old, children from birth, basically, from the minute they enter childcare. And they all sound fine, don't they? Because democracy sounds fine. But of course, we know there's a big debate about whether we really live in a fully democratic
of the settled community. We're talking about being Indian origin, African origin, Latin American origin. The point is we should not be divided. because when Brexit finishes, there's not going to be a wonderful immigration policy for Commonwealth immigrants. I wrote a piece about this in The Guardian recently. It was a surprise to people that there will not be a wonderful time and a wonderful land for all of us who came in the 60s. That may be a slight surprise to people that the Home Office will not be delivering that, but that is the truth. Because what is underpinning it is racism, racial discrimination. So the fight that we have to fight is an internationalist one. It is sometimes a sophisticated one. But my clear point here today for the national demonstration is we must always make the connections between racism here, now, locally, the race attacks that we've seen and we want to prevent, the race discrimination we want to prevent, and what is happening with our sisters and brothers everywhere that they're suffering racism. That is not too big a fight. I think that is a focused and essential fight for us, and we must stay focused on it.
OK, thank you, Claude. Before I call our next speaker, I just want to mention very quickly something that's going to be happening in the Midlands later on this year. If people were in the plenary earlier on, they would have heard Roger Mackenzie mention that there's a campaign to have a blue plaque erected for Enoch Powell in Wolverhampton, and there's also obviously a campaign to stop that happening. The Bishop of Wolverhampton has come out in support of that, and there is a petition online, I think there's one in the room somewhere, that we want people to sign. And just very quickly as well, Midlands TUC and Stand Up to Racism have booked the hotel where he made that disgusting speech on the same day, at the same time that he made it, on the 20th of April. And our plan is to fill that room with the children of migrants, famous and not so famous.
Watched the bereaved families come down the aisle and looked at the fact that actually they were predominantly 95% black and minority ethnic. We read out the names of those who perished at Grenfell, and 50 out of the 72 are from the Muslim or the black and ethnic minority communities. And I think when you see it, when you hear it,
we as individual trade unionists can't do anything in the face of a toxic, racist general election that we saw, etc., as we all know. I put a motion to the EIS conference 3 years ago, and we're used to, passing motions or whatever. I'm actually quite proud of this one, because the motion was to call for the union to produce the Myths of Immigration pamphlets for use from early years, age-appropriate from early years through to college students. I have to say, I had to nag the union for 2 years to what was happening to them then when we passed it unanimously. And now it's a great resource. We've used it all over the place. Anyone who wants a copy of it, please see me afterwards and I'll send you the link to the website. It's available there. We can't give out the hard copies because they've been used. They're being used across Scotland. They're really fantastic in the classroom. So please see me afterwards for that. Health workers are saying, I'll check your pulse, but not your passport. And I think that's really important that in Prevent, in Edinburgh College, where I work, we opposed it, and we said it's not just about making the training less Islamophobic and less racist. No, it's about stopping Prevent. We do not turn our students into suspects. So we took the issue when we heard that they were going to bring it in a couple of years ago, in fact. When we took it to the members, it wasn't unanimous. It was a hard argument, but we won it. And then we said, we are not having this training. Management said, well, a ballot. Well, look, bugger your ballot. There will be a boycott, ballot or no ballot. We will be outside. There will be a picket line on any door where this training is taking place. So they backed off, and there's been no training in Prevent in Edinburgh College. And I just wish that some unions, sometimes you have to take a position as a union, go to the union leadership and say, you've got to lead. It's not enough to say, as I heard from another union, which I won't shame by mentioning, but they said, well, we haven't had much of a response from the members about doing this. Well, why? That's because they didn't actually take a lead. And lastly, I think, people think it's an add-on, raising issues of racism in the trade union, that the main thing is wages and conditions. We've just won upward harmonisation in FE in Scotland, and that is a 22% increase in wages in the smaller colleges and best conditions across the sector. Sorry. How can you do that if you think that the main cause of your low wage is someone clinging to a dinghy as a refugee in the Mediterranean? You can't.
Well done, Edinburgh. Eh? Okay, Sally's going to be followed by Paul, if you can make your way to...
Yeah, I thought about putting my T-shirt on since it had been mentioned. Yep, okay. I've got some good news for all you history teachers and biology teachers. Turns out the first person in England was black, with blue eyes. Jobs are good, isn't it? Next time the racists tell my friends to go back to the... I will have a conversation with them. And I think it's important sometimes we have to pull back the good news story, because it can become very, very depressing, can't it? The prevent agenda. A friend of mine who managed to escape from the camp, got to college, started doing his course, comes home from college going, I've got to learn about British values, and we just went, anyway, we won't go there. Because obviously the British values that they were being taught were human values, nothing to do with whether you were born in Britain or not. But I want to say something else as well, because I was involved with solidarity work when the Calais camp was there, and I'm unfortunately, I'm not going back tomorrow because I'm back at work on Monday, but other people are going to Dunkirk and Calais tomorrow. There are no camps anymore, by the way. People are living in mud, hiding from the police in trees, etc. But that solidarity work has to continue, because we have to see what's going on 22 miles from our shores in order to understand how evil our government is. Yeah. And the other thing, just to finish, because one of the things when people get to the UK, and they don't get here legally, by the way. I mean, when we talk about the Dubs children, no one's got in here legally since, I think, last Christmas. And I know at the end of this month, there's another court case where we're trying to get the Dubs kids back in. Again, we should throw our weight behind that, get stuff done in the schools. We want the children in our classrooms, etc., etc. And use the schools, because I must admit, one of the most beautiful things I've seen over the last year is letters from children in primary schools in Leeds and Wakefield and places like that, saying to children who are stuck in the Calais and Dunkirk camps, we want you in our schools. There's a place for you in our school. My grandma's lonely, she wants a friend, come to our country, yeah, I know. So finally, the NEU have reissued their education pack on welcoming refugee children to our schools. You can see it online. But within that, there's also a number of films of kids, refugee kids who come to Britain, and how they say what's important and how they were welcomed to the schools. We are organising a conference, or mini workshop, on the 9th of June. You are very welcome to come to Wakefield. It's only 2 hours up north.
Okay. Paul is going to be followed by the woman in the blue, if you want to make your way.
Yeah, I just...
Go.
Right, nice to see you again. So, the first thing I want to start with is actually just a bit of a quick announcement, which is that yesterday we got our ballot result through because we were being balloted over the issue of inner London pay. We're an outer London school, and the ballot has come back incredibly successful. There's an overwhelming yes vote, and we'll be taking industrial action after half term.
Really good.
I mean, realistically, we want the dispute resolved and everything else. Everyone knows we take industrial action lightly, but we want the dispute resolved. We think teachers should be paid in the London pay in outer London areas, and there's a reason why, actually, because we want to recruit and retain young, exciting and vibrant teachers. I'll start with that, and the reason why I start with that is because I'm really pleased that I've actually turned up here today alongside a PGCE student who's just left our school, and the reason why, because she's a fantastic teacher alongside other fantastic young teachers, PGCE students that came to our school recently, and it's also because when Daniel talks about the kind of education that he got going into teaching, this is the kind of teachers that we want to see. These are the kind of teachers, the young teachers we want to see coming into the profession, because they're going to be making a difference to young people's lives. Our PGC students were heavily involved in Black History Month, LGBT Month, and actually in our school we've been doing a UN project about refugees in Palestine, and they took part and helped out organise that as well. It's those kind of things that we think are incredibly important to young kids' lives. And that kind of political commitment, that kind of anti-racist commitment is absolutely vital for teachers. You get to that stage because of the fact that within the school itself, you have to feel a level of confidence. You see, we do loads of great things in our school. Black History Month, Refugee Week, you name it, we do it, and it's done superbly. And you can, I believe, you can only get to that stage when you feel confident that there is a trade union group who's prepared to take on the issues of pay and conditions, but also the pedagogical matters and the social justice matters, like what we talk about. When we done Black History Month this year, our girls done this fantastic assembly where at the end of it, it was all based on the American football stuff. They all took a knee in front of the whole audience. It was absolutely superb. We sold badges, stand up to racism, you name it. Everything was being done. But all of that is because our teachers generally feel confident. Why? Because we've got a trade union group is prepared to take on pay and conditions issues, but also prepared to stand up for the kids in the classroom. And we think you can't do two separately. I don't think it's possible for a teacher, no matter how brave you might feel, no matter how committed you feel, you need to know you've got a trade union who's prepared to back you. And that is why I think the two things go hand in hand.
Right, okay. This way. And then, Naima. Yeah.
Hello, Borodar. Good morning, everybody. Greetings of solidarity from Swansea NASUWT Local Association in Wales. I'm a teacher. I'm also a union rep, but I'm a teacher working with pupils who are not in mainstream. Sorry, I've got to the mic now, so I realise I was probably not expressing myself properly before. So I'm a teacher working with non-mainstream pupils, and our local association stands against racism, of course, in all its forms. But what's been driven home to me recently, I want to say with great shame in terms of British values, I've seen how British policies are really damaging young people's futures. When an asylum seeker pupil, for example, is excluded from a school that they've barely been in for a few months and ends up out of mainstream, how difficult it is, how isolating, and no funding. If you're an asylum seeker, there is just no funding. You knock on every door, charities, statutory bodies, there is no funding, and it is heartbreaking. And it just makes a mockery of Prevent, because these policies would disaffect any human being. And I feel disaffected on behalf of this pupil that I've been trying to support. I'm ashamed of the British values inherent in the actual policies. The other thing I wanted to mention is not related to education, but I think is relevant because I've witnessed it. I've been in court recently supporting a friend, a neighbour who I recently met, who was about to be evicted by the local council, an EU citizen who had lost... Yep, just one more detail about this incident that I feel so ashamed of. Her treatment in court by a judge. She hadn't been able to support herself through illness, and she was about to be evicted. And I'm just horrified at the so-called British values that I've seen in action on my own doorstep, and we stand in solidarity.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Naima, then Rob.
Oh, hi, my name's Naima Omar. I'm part of Students Stand Up to Racism, and I think it is very important to have this meeting considering that the schools and education has become a battleground for Islamophobia to spread, and it's just a basis for it, whether that be Prevent, where young Muslim students' voices are basically being stripped away. When I was at university, I felt like I couldn't say certain things about CERT just in case someone would say something to me, or whether that be the discussion of the headscarf with Ofsted asking why young Muslim girls wear the headscarf. I chose to wear it because I wanted to be more like my mum, as if I don't look like her already, but I wanted to be more similar to her. And I think it's disgusting how they choose to target young Muslim girls. In St. Stephen's, it's amazing that we fought back against it. They banning off the headscarf and the fasting. Like, how are you going to stop someone fasting? I used to lie to my mum about fasting at school. She said, don't fast. I always used to do it to kind of fit in. But it's important that we fight against Islamophobia where it spreads, because it's becoming the battleground. And I think in France, it started in schools. It started with 2 teachers telling a young Muslim girl she couldn't wear the headscarf. And when the St. Stephen's did that ban, I was completely worried. I was like, oh, I don't want to swear, but like, holy, like, well, we're going to go down that route. We have to make sure we fight back against it. And it's important the role that Stand Up to Racism had in bringing the teachers and the students and the parents together in order to fight back against that. But the thing I wanted to come and talk about as well was the Student Stand Up to Racism conference on the 3rd of March, where we have loads of speakers, including Loki, who's a major rapper. And it's important that students get involved as well, and make sure that they have their voice. Make sure that they have their voices in this. And I think you could go back to your schools or universities and try to get students on it. And like, I'll be more than happy to come and speak at the schools. I've done it once or twice. I don't like being called Miss. It makes me feel old. But like, I won't mind coming back and actually having that discussion with students and getting them more involved and active in the fight against racism, because it really, truly did affect them, and they're students who are raised in a multicultural society who are going to be the first to fight for it and will always be on that battleground. Cheers.
Right. OK. Rob will be followed by the gentleman there.
Rob Ferguson, Publicity Officer for Newham Teachers Association and convener of Newham Stand Up to Racism. The first point I want to make is actually about pedagogy and curriculum in relation to the preventing violent extremism narrative and that agenda, because that agenda is about surveillance, but it's not only about surveillance. It is an agenda and a narrative that threatens to undermine pedagogy and the curriculum. I'll give one blatant example. In Leicestershire, the so-called Respect programme has a resource that they encourage schools to use in their pastoral sessions, which places the suffragettes alongside the Nazis and Al-Qaeda as examples of extremism. In my own former college, a prevent consultant who goes round the FE sector and is quite lauded, advised our pastoral team not to include the suffragettes in a resource on women's equality. I have to say that we ignored her, absolutely, and in fact extended the section on the suffragettes. I obviously do want to say something about Newham and St. Stephen's, because this afternoon, one of the speakers on the panel will be a parent, Shalimar Khatun, who's been at the forefront of organising solidarity for the NEU's anti-academisation struggles in Newham. There have been meetings of parents of hundreds and scores, and they've come down onto the picket lines, organising stalls, explaining to parents in Bengali and in other languages what the dispute is about. But solidarity cuts both ways. And Newham NEU will be writing to every school and head of governors, asking them to assure parents there will be no change in the uniform policy on the question of the hijab option. And I think, and we are talking to parents at St. Stephen's at the moment, and we are going to move to challenge Ofsted, to challenge Amanda Spielman. The truth is coming out. There was a parents' meeting of over 100 strong at St. Stephen's, and the narrative that they are conservative extremists is a racist disgrace. And it needs to be countered, and we're going to do that. But I'll finish with this, because there's something we can all do here. We have here copies of a petition that has now been signed, I think, by right across the board in the National Education Union National Executive. We want signatures from divisions locally and across unions, but also leading faith figures in your areas, parents' organisations, community organisations, and so on. So please come and see me. Take this petition. We need to build the opposition opposition to this agenda from sections of the press and from Ofsted.
Right, gentleman here, and then the woman in the beanie. No, sorry, the woman in the beanie.
Morning from Cheddar Country. Mohammed Malik, bus driver from Devon. I don't teach. I drive a bus for a living. The thing is, racism is structural. And you've got to understand that. It's not just educational, it affects all aspects of life. And to understand racism, you've got to understand the structure of how it's built. It's a project. It's a project to destroy certain classes and to control them. And we have to understand that in its context. And when those gears are put together, education, mass media, work, and the criminal justice system, it brings racism out. And you have to look at that project in its entirety, not just at the education level. But the education is important because it's the first step. But the whole project is interwoven. And Unite, the union which I represent, we've got something called Race Forward campaign, which is bringing race into the workplace and saying what is happening to people within the workplace. Unless we don't look at what's happening in the workplace, when people go home, they educate their children in a different manner, that the foreigner's taking the job, the foreigner's taking the home, that's why they're locked up, and that's why they're criminals. So please, 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 look at the racism as a project. It's a structural project, not an isolated incident. Thank you.
Emma will be followed by, sorry, gentleman, slipping, okay.
Hi, my name's Emma and I'm a primary school teacher, music primary school teacher in Barking and Dagenham. And I'm the person also who's promoting the Love Music Hate Racism beanie hat, which are available at the back, and you can get the t-shirts and bags as well. But actually I want to start with Love Music Hate Racism because last weekend I spent in Bristol within a National Union of Teachers, or the new Education Union, conference on Love Music Hate Racism in education. And it was really quite inspiring to be discussing with other teachers about how we can be using culture within our schools and within our communities to actually counter the offensive, the structural offensive of racism that we've been talking about. And that could be through assemblies, that can be through festivals and so on. And so I just want to put that out there as an idea. But I also think that within education at the moment, the attack is so great that actually that means that the resistance against it also needs to match that. And there's a lot of opportunities to do things in schools. I think collecting, for example, around refugees and having assemblies is a very good starting point. It's something that I've done and had lots of success around, and anyone can do it in their school. But also I think the issue around Islamophobia and prevent are things that we really urgently need to be taking up. I was a little bit worried at this conference that I was at that none of the other teachers there, it was a lot of young teachers, actually understood or knew the policy of the NEU on prevent, which is to oppose prevent. And they were telling me that they actually had been reporting incidents as well that they thought might have been terrorist incidents or whatever. And these are primary school teachers, and I was really concerned about that. So I think, we can't sit on our hands around these things, especially around prevent or the hijab. We need to really be confident in taking up the issues and also organising meetings and informing people. Actually, the training is really what is leading to people feeling isolated, like they can't be speaking out against it, and we really need to be raising that banner quite high. Last thing I'm going to say is the 17th of March national demonstration, UN Anti-Racism Day, is a very important day for all of us in education and all of us who work in any workplace to say racism has no place in our workplace. It divides us. We need unity to stop the cuts and to get rid of the Tories.
Thank you. We're literally on our last two speakers, so I am going to ask them to be brief.
And I will do. Thank you, Jess, for giving me the time to actually speak. And thank you for the panel for your inspiring speeches as well. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Nathaniel Palmer. I'm a mental health recovery support worker who works for the South West London St George's Mental Health Trust. And we cover Wandsworth, Merton, Sutton, Richmond and Kingston. Richmond is where I work, one of the most affluent boroughs in London. But I just wanted to say who I am, first of all. And it's just a few things I wanted to respond in regards to what had been spoken about, and all very, very informative and insightful of what you had said. Just a few comments on the fact that with regards to focusing on schools and workplaces as an educating tool against racism, it's very great and it's very positive to do so. But I think because of racism, we need to understand that it is a system. It is an institutionalized, it's operating in an institutionalized setting, and that is across, I feel, the whole of the world. And racism is very obviously closely linked to white supremacy, and the fact that the idea of power needs to be in the hands of one particular race. And so to fight against it needs to be on a bigger platform. And there are big platforms which are easier to access. And so my suggestion is about using the tools which are more attractive to the mass population of the whole of the world, such as YouTube, Eventbrite, Twitter, Snapchat, which I'm sure we hear about already, but that needs to be focused on. I wanted to touch on with regards to if we accept how long racism has been going on for, British colonisation, the agenda for white supremacy, it's over 400 years maybe longer. So as my sister, my Muslim sister explained of, it's 2018, she's shocked and shouldn't be having to me, I'm not shocked. This is 2018, but slavery was only 400 years, has been going for 400 years. So 100 years or so since the abolishment of slavery, we have to be realistic on the approach. And it was just, also, oh gosh.
You can wind up.
Yeah, just to simply say, we need to understand that it is a system. It's not an individual calling someone a name, and we work in a coverted way when it comes to racism. I'm a black man, and I only see a few of us, and we have to understand that black people, not just because I am black, are probably the first place that one needs to start from. Because if you give justice to that and solve that, then gender, sexuality, disability will all start to benefit. So start with dealing with black. The injustice and oppression to black people that has been going on for 400 years by just simply teaching British history properly. Just simply teaching that.
Thank you very much. Naila will be our final contributor.
Hi, yeah, I'm from Stand Up to Racism. I'm based in Manchester, and I just wanted to put a bit of context about some of the stuff that was spoken about today, particularly around the hijab statement and how I think that's a really important initiative. Alongside that, having resources to take into schools, I think will really empower teachers. So I do think the two things need to work together. I think it's fantastic that we've got union people supporting the statement, putting their names to the statement, but I think we also need to start thinking about how we use that statement, how do we get the message out, because, I think right now Muslim parents, all the ones I speak to just feel like they're under attack constantly, and I think we have to be at all the school gates handing out this statement and showing them that actually they're not on their own, because it's, it's quite shocking, isn't it? I've just been involved in, events around Holocaust Memorial Day, remembering what happened and talking about never again. And then at the same time, March the 8th is International Women's Day. You think about these two major events in the calendar that we all talk about, and yet at the same time we are, we're in a room talking about the fact that a government agency, Ofsted, want to go in and talk to young girls in schools. It just seems unbelievable to me that we would do this. How we learnt nothing from history when they think that they can do this. And the only way they can get away with it is because they feel so powerful and we feel so, that what we do doesn't matter. And I think that's why organisations like Stand Up to Racism are so important, because we come together and we start understanding that we're part of a network. That actually, if we can go back to each of our schools, we can really create another network of other activists. So I think it's absolutely fantastic that teachers are here today, and I really hope that you can go back to your trade union branches and, support the statement, pass some motions, get involved. I mean, invite Stand Up to Racism speakers into school. I went in a school a couple of weeks ago. A young girl came up to me after and said, I'd really like to get involved. I'd like to set up a local student group at the school. Just goes to show what's possible. But I think it is about us all working together. Sorry, they're asking me to wrap up, but really, this is a good start, but actually we need to take that statement out. We need to take the resources out and really build a movement against racism. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much for the offer. from the sister from Scotland, the resources that they're prepared to share for all key stages in school about the myth of immigration. So we're going to be sharing those, I assume, on the Stand Up to Racism Facebook website. Jess is coordinating a working party, and if you'd like to be on that, again, where we're trying to get together resources for schools and educational institutions. We need much more of those and hope to publish that quite soon. If you want to organise and you're interested in your area in organising anything around love music, hate racism, people should talk to Kurly. Come and see Kurly. He'll be here all day, I think, and get ideas from him. And then there is the work that we've all got to do over the hijab and Ofsted. There is this statement, which Rob has got hard copies of, but we will be posting that on Stand Up to Racism. We've also got a model motion for people to pass in their trade union branch. We'll be posting that up on Monday. And also a model letter to send to head teachers and boards of governors, because I just want to end on this very last point. So Ofsted are threatening schools that if they proceed with the wearing of the hijab and they're not vigilant about Islamophobia, that they will be under the wrath of Ofsted. So writing to governors, writing to head teachers, imploring them to stand firm on diversity and inclusivity is vital. So those resources will be available for all of you. And please talk to me if you've got any concerns about that. Anything from the stage? No, other than what a great session. And thank you all. Okay.